What's the most powerful weapon in a human's arsenal? You might say strength, intelligence, or perhaps even one's network. But in reality, the single most powerful weapon anyone has at their disposal is a lie. Bluff in a poker game and you stand to win the entire pot, even if you have nothing in your hand. Lie to your senior authority and you can cover up years of illegal activity. Today, we explore the life of an individual who maximised the potential of a bold-faced lie. One who, simply by saying it with enough conviction, was able to scam an entire country into printing fake money through the very banks that made the country's real currency. A scheme that would go on to crumble Portugal's economy for years to come and change its modern history for good. This is the story of Alves dos Reis. Now, to get a better understanding of how Dos Reis was able to pull off a financial scam of this magnitude, we need to take a few steps back. Because Dos Reis was not born into wealth. In fact, his early environment was quite the opposite. Born in 1896 and surrounded by poverty, most of his peers didn't have enough money to put food on the table, let alone live a life of comfort or luxury. However, Dos Reis, even from a young age, proved to be quite the oxymoron from the circumstances that surrounded him. He had an ambition to live a life bathed in riches, and, as you might have guessed, he wasn't exactly afraid to break the rules in order to get there. He started by attempting to get an engineering degree in Lisbon. However, this educational pursuit was quickly abandoned when Dos Reis turned 18 and he was met with the opportunity to marry a woman from a high-ranking family. Marrying into a family born into wealth gave Dos Reis a taste for the finer life that he had always craved. However, almost as soon as the ceremony started, Dos Reis' father became bankrupt. The family of his wife became disgusted with the very idea of one becoming bankrupt, causing them to cut all ties with Dos Reis and his family, leaving him completely back at square one. All the ambition, none of the means to get there. And it was this very moment that would motivate Dos Reis to move to Angola in 1916. A decision that would quickly change the course of not only his life, but that of Portugal for good. You see, by this point, Dos Reis was bored of failing. He failed in his education, he failed in his marriage, and he was failing in his life. Upon crossing the Angolan border, this constant failure was going to stop by any means necessary. Dos Reis started by forging himself a diploma from a fake school at Oxford University, giving him a platform to secure a good job and build his empire. And with this fake degree in hand, he was able to become the director of the Angolan Railways, a career that most would work years to obtain. After the First World War, Dos Reis would employ his skills in deception once again, this time in a poker game. The story goes that, with a handful of nothing, Dos Reis was able to win a majority share in the very railway company that employed him. His plan was to sell his shares at a higher price before the share transfers had gone through in New York. However, this scheme was quickly uncovered by the authorities, who handed Dos Reis his first prison sentence in 1924, where he eventually served just 34 days behind bars. This initial scheme, though ultimately a failure, proved a valuable lesson for Dos Reis. It taught him that the true deception requires a little more cunning and intricate planning, and his next financial scam would be so well thought out that it would fool every financial institution in Portugal and ultimately go on to crumble its economy for years to come. In essence, Dos Reis wanted to print counterfeit money that he could use to get his hands on real notes. However, he wasn't going to print this cash himself, as this would be too simple to uncover. Instead, he was going to get the very bank who printed the real money to do it for him. To do this, he forged documents authorising the printing of additional 500 escudo notes on behalf of the Banco de Portugal. The paperwork looked flawless. There were official stamps, signatures, and even government seals. He then took the documents to Waterlow and Sons, the same London company that printed Portugal's legitimate currency. And, believing that these documents were legitimate, Waterlow and Sons ultimately authorised the printing of 200 million escudos, worth more than 1% of Portugal's GDP at the time. Once in possession of the counterfeit notes, he founded his own bank, the Angola e Metropole Bank, which allowed him to replace the fake money with real notes by granting loans at better rates than any other bank. This scheme was honestly beautiful, because Dos Reis was able to get rid of any connection to the fake notes almost immediately, while simultaneously earning thousands of dollars overnight, without the slightest hint of suspicion. And with all this money, it's no understatement to say that Dos Reis began to live like an absolute king. He brought multiple villas across the country, threw parties that would get headlines even today, and even funded plenty of development projects across Angola. However, just a few short months after building this complex, intricate, and frankly genius financial scam, Dos Reis would make a fatal mistake that would ultimately bring the entire operation to a screaming halt. Now, before we unveil how Dos Reis' complex web of financial illusion was eventually uncovered, if you haven't already, please pound that subscribe button. It's completely free and it'll help prevent scammers from robbing you of your entire life savings. So please, do yourself a favour, subscribe or be scammed. You see, when Dos Reis' fake notes began circulating in Portugal, some, unknowingly, had duplicate serial numbers of genuine notes. Dutch and British banks quickly noticed this discrepancy and turned to the Banco de Portugal for an explanation, which they were obviously unable to give, as you can't exactly have two official banknotes with the same serial number. This discovery sparked an internal investigation at the Banco de Portugal, who quickly realised they were looking at a simply unimaginable level of fraud, and all the evidence pointed to one man, Dos Reis. The very next day, he was arrested on the Adolf Warman, a German ship heading for Angola, and put to trial for his suspected involvement in this financial scam. The trial would ultimately go on for 5 years, purely due to how convincing Dos Reis' forged documents were. However, he was eventually found guilty, and for his crimes was sentenced to 20 years in prison. After serving his sentence, Dos Reis was released in 1945 and travelled immediately back to Angola, where, funnily enough, he attempted another financial swindle, this time in the coffee trade. This scam was uncovered before it had a chance to even begin, and for his efforts, Dos Reis was handed another 4-year prison sentence. However, before serving this sentence, he died of a heart attack, marking a premature end to his life. Ultimately, the story of Alves Dos Reis goes to show just how far you can take things if you lie with enough conviction, by planting the right seeds of doubt in the right places. He was quite literally able to disrupt an entire country's economy for years to come and become unequivocally rich in the process. Now, pulling off a financial scam like this is obviously one hell of an achievement. However, compared to Gregor McGregor, who was literally able to convince hundreds of people that he was the prince of a tropical South American island, his scheme does feel a little lightweight. Check out the video that's popping up on your screen now, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about.